The world saw William Ashford as untouchable, a man of steel, power, and endless fortune. His name shimmered across skyscrapers. His signature sealed billion-dollar deals before breakfast, and his face graced the covers of every magazine that worshipped success. But behind the polished smile and diamond cufflinks lived a secret eating him alive. William Ashford was dying, and no amount of money could stop it. The diagnosis came quietly, almost politely. A private doctor, trembling as he handed over the report, whispered the words William would never forget. Terminal, 6 months, at best. For a long moment, William didn't react. He simply stared at the doctor with those cold, unreadable eyes that had once reduced boardrooms to silence. Then, with a faint smirk, he said, "You'll send the bill to my assistant." But that night, when the city lights dimmed and the echoes of New York faded into the dark, the mighty billionaire sat alone in his office, surrounded by silence far louder than any applause he'd ever earned. The rain fell in steady rhythm against the glass, and his reflection stared back older than he remembered, fragile in ways he refused to admit. On his desk lay a stack of medical reports, like tombstones made of paper. He picked one up, scanned the words again, and let it fall. No known cure. The phrase burned itself into his mind. He had bought everything life could offer: planes, islands, art, power. But now, standing at the edge of death, none of it mattered. He poured himself a drink, hands trembling, and whispered, "All this, and I can't even buy time." The amber liquid shimmered under the city lights, mocking him like gold in a coffin. Memories flashed, the deals, the headlines, the betrayals, the lonely dinners, and suddenly, all his victories felt hollow. The phone buzzed. His head snapped toward it, the screen glowing with a familiar name. Marcus Hale, his head of security. William pressed accept, forcing his voice steady. "Talk, sir. The plane to Zurich is ready. Dr. Vogel's team confirmed they're waiting for you." William didn't respond. He'd already been to Switzerland, Tokyo, Dubai, every clinic that promised miracles. Every time, he came back sicker, angrier, emptier. Finally, he said quietly, "Cancel it." "Cancel, sir." Marcus sounded unsure. "I said cancel." William's tone was final, the kind that usually ended conversations and careers. The call disconnected. He leaned back in his chair, staring at the skyline that had once felt like his kingdom. Now it looked like a tomb, made of light. So this is how it ends, he thought. Not with an empire falling, but with a man alone in the dark. But fate, as always, has a strange way of listening when the powerful finally whisper for help. It happened hours later. Sleepless, restless, William scrolled through medical forums, private networks, and encrypted threads, digital hunting grounds for billionaires chasing immortality. Then something unusual caught his eye. A message posted under a familiar alias, Rafael Navarro, a name that hadn't appeared in years. Navarro, the tech visionary who vanished after a diagnosis of late-stage cancer. Yet here he was, posting again. The message was short, almost cryptic. "There's a man on an island. Name's Elijah. He doesn't call himself a doctor, but he heals the dying. The kind of healing money can't buy." William frowned. Another scam. Another mystic. He almost scrolled past until he saw the attached image. Navarro, smiling on a beach, alive and healthy. The timestamp was recent. Beneath the photo, one line, "Elijah doesn't take payment. He only helps those who prove they still have a soul." A bitter laugh escaped William's throat. "A soul," he murmured. "That's the one thing I sold a long time ago." But something stirred deep inside him. Not belief, not hope, but curiosity. And curiosity had always been his most dangerous habit. Within 48 hours, William Ashford vanished from public view. News channels speculated, scandal, exile, secret treatment. His PR team said nothing. His empire moved like a machine without its master. And high, above the clouds, on a private jet flying under a false name, William sat staring out the window, the Atlantic stretching endlessly below. Across from him sat Grace, his loyal assistant of 15 years. She watched him quietly, her expression softer than his world ever allowed. "Are you sure about this, sir?" she asked. He didn't turn to her. "I've spent my life trusting science, numbers, logic," he said. "Maybe it's time I trust something I can't control. And if this Elijah refuses to see you," he glanced at her, eyes cold again. "Everyone has a price." Grace hesitated. "They say he can't be bought." William smiled faintly. "Everyone can be bought, Grace, you just have to find what they're selling." Hours later, the plane touched down on a small Caribbean island wrapped in mist and sunlight. The air was heavy with salt and rain, the kind that smelled like the world before greed touched it. A local driver greeted them, an older man with skin weathered by sun and sea. He spoke little as he guided them up a dirt road through thick jungle until the trees opened to reveal a small cluster of huts made of bamboo and palm leaves. William stepped out, unimpressed. "This is it." The driver nodded. "This is where people come to be healed." William adjusted his suit, brushing off the dust as if money could shield him from nature. Inside one of the huts, he saw people resting, old, young, pale, dark, all looking strangely peaceful. When they noticed him, whispers filled the air. A woman murmured, "He came." Before William could speak, a deep voice echoed from behind him. "You shouldn't have come here seeking power." He turned sharply. Standing in the doorway was a tall black man in a simple white robe, barefoot, eyes calm but piercing, the kind of eyes that saw more than a man wanted to reveal. He carried a bowl of herbs, the scent of earth and rain trailing behind him. "Elijah," William said slowly, "I was told you could heal me." Elijah looked at him for a long moment. "I don't heal. The body heals itself when the soul remembers who it is." William let out a scoff. "Save me the sermons. I'll pay whatever you want. 10 million. 100 million. Just tell me what you need." Elijah's expression didn't change. "I need nothing from you." William's jaw tightened. "Everyone needs something. Not me," Elijah said softly, "but you do." William took a step closer, the sharpness returning to his tone. "If you think I came here for riddles, you're mistaken. I came here to live. Then you must learn why you're dying." Elijah replied, "Your sickness began long before your body failed. You forgot what it means to be human." William's anger cracked through his composure. "You talk like a preacher. I came for results." Elijah's voice grew firm. "Then leave. The sea will take you home." William slammed his hand against the table. "You don't dismiss me." For the first time, Elijah's calm shifted into quiet intensity. "Then stay. But understand this, if you wish to live, you must first learn what your money has made you forget." The room fell silent except for the sound of wind through the palm leaves. That night, William lay awake in the small bamboo hut Elijah had given him. No marble walls, no silk sheets, just the sound of crickets and the ocean breathing in the dark. His body ached, but it wasn't just sickness. It was the weight of everything he'd built, everything he'd lost, everything he'd lost, everything he'd done to become William Ashford. For the first time in his life, he had no control, no power, no price to offer. Only a question that echoed in his mind. What if this man was right? What if healing wasn't about medicine, but redemption? As the first light of dawn broke through the palm leaves, William turned his gaze toward the jungle, where Elijah was already walking barefoot through the dew. Somewhere deep inside, something shifted, a faint spark. Fragile but alive, and though he didn't know it yet, that spark would change everything. The sun rose over the small coastal village like a prayer whispered into the wind. It painted the horizon in gold and fire, kissing the waves that broke gently along the shore. Fishermen pushed their boats into the sea. Children chased chickens through the sand, and from a small wooden hut at the edge of the forest, smoke drifted lazily into the morning air. Inside that hut lived a man the locals called Elijah the Healer. He was no doctor, no scientist, just a quiet man, with deep, thoughtful eyes and hands that seemed to carry the wisdom of the earth itself. His days were simple, grinding herbs, boiling roots, tending to the sick who came to him with more hope than money. And though many whispered that his touch worked miracles, Elijah always said the same thing. "I don't heal," he would tell them softly. "I only help the body remember how." He lived by faith, by rhythm, by balance. His hut was filled with the scent of lemongrass and wood smoke, the sound of wind through dried herbs hanging from the ceiling. To the world beyond this tiny village, he didn't exist. And that was how he liked it. But peace never lasts long when the world of greed begins to stir. One morning, as Elijah poured water over a clay bowl of herbs, he noticed the rumble of engines echoing through the forest, a sound foreign to this quiet place. Moments later, 3 black SUVs appeared at the edge of the village, kicking up dust as they stopped near his hut. The villagers froze, watching from a distance. Out stepped men in tailored suits, sunglasses gleaming beneath the tropical sun. Elijah wiped his hands and walked toward them calmly. "You've come a long way for herbs," he said, his tone light but watchful. One of the men, tall, stern, clearly in charge, stepped forward. "Are you Elijah?" "I am." The man nodded. "Mr. Ashford sent us. He wishes to meet you." Elijah studied them quietly. "I don't take clients with bodyguards," he said. The man frowned. "You misunderstand. Mr. Ashford is not a client. He's a man in need. A very wealthy man. He can make you rich beyond imagination." A slow smile crossed Elijah's face. "And what would I buy with imagination?" The man pulled out an envelope, heavy and sealed in gold foil. "A blank check. Whatever number you write, it's yours." Elijah didn't touch it. He looked past the man, toward the sea, where the wind carried the sound of children laughing. "Tell your employer that I'm not for sale," he said quietly. "Healing isn't a business." The man's jaw tightened. "You don't understand who you're refusing." "I understand enough," Elijah said. "If he believes his money can buy life, then he's already poorer than you think." He turned and walked back to his hut, leaving the men standing in silence. The villagers whispered. No one had ever spoken to outsiders like that, especially men dressed like power itself. By evening, the SUVs were gone. The waves returned to their rhythm. The jungle sighed again. Elijah sat by the fire, stirring a pot of herbs meant for a fevered child. But even as the night grew still, something lingered in his thoughts, a name that felt heavy with sorrow. William Ashford. He had heard it before. Whispered in news radios, the fisherman played, mentioned in the headlines of newspapers that wrapped the fish at the market. A man of wealth, of ambition, and, recently, of tragedy. Word had spread even to this remote shore that the billionaire had fallen ill, that no doctor could save him, that his empire was rotting while he searched the world for hope. Elijah closed his eyes and sighed. So the mighty have come to kneel, he murmured. Days passed. The sky stayed quiet, but fate is patient. It waits for the right moment to speak. 3 days later, just as dawn began to break, a small boat approached the shore. This time, only one man stepped out, older, dressed simply, no bodyguards, no suits. He carried no briefcase, only an envelope. His face was tired, kind, worn by loyalty. Are you Elijah? The man asked. I am, Elijah replied. You've come farther than most. What do you need? The man hesitated, then said, I'm not here to buy anything. I'm here to beg. Something in his voice made Elijah pause. The man introduced himself as Marcus Hale, head of security for William Ashford. He spoke plainly, without pride or persuasion. He told Elijah the truth about the illness that no medicine could cure, about the billion-dollar empire that meant nothing now, and about his employer, who was losing not just his life, but his will to live. He's not asking for miracles, Marcus said quietly. He's asking for a chance to believe there's still something money can't control. Elijah listened without speaking. When Marcus finished, the healer turned to the horizon, watching the sun rise over the sea. If your master truly seeks life, he said, he must come as a man, not as a king. Marcus nodded slowly. He's already lost his crown. The healer's eyes softened. Then perhaps there's hope for him after all. That evening, Elijah prepared. Not potions, not promises, just himself. He packed his satchel with herbs and roots, each chosen for a reason. Not to fight death, but to test the man who feared it. Because Elijah had seen many kinds of sickness, but the worst one was always the sickness of the soul. As night fell, he stood at the edge of the village, the waves dark and endless before him. The wind carried whispers of fate, and he felt it, a shift, a calling. Somewhere beyond that sea, a dying man was waiting, and though Elijah didn't yet know what the path would demand, something inside him stirred, not pity, not fear, but purpose. But the villagers watched him go, some in silence, some in prayer. One old woman called after him, the world beyond these shores is hungry. Elijah, don't let it eat your light. He smiled faintly. The light isn't mine to lose, he said, and stepped into the boat. The tide pulled him away from the land he knew, toward a destiny he didn't. The stars shimmered above him like quiet witnesses as the current carried him into the unknown. Behind him, the village faded into darkness. Ahead, the island where William Ashford waited. And in that space between the two worlds, the healer and the dying man, destiny began to stir. Soon their paths would collide, and neither man would leave the same. The ocean shimmered beneath the burning Caribbean sun as William Ashford's private helicopter descended upon the remote island. The rotor's thunder broke through the stillness of the jungle, scattering birds and bending palm trees like they were bowing to the sound of power. The billionaire stepped out impeccably dressed in a dark tailored suit, his shoes shining, his watch glinting with the reflection of the waves. Everything about him screamed control, authority, command. But the island did not care who he was. The earth beneath his feet did not move for him. The sea didn't stop. The wind didn't bow. Waiting near the tree line was Elijah, dressed in a loose white shirt and linen trousers, barefoot, holding nothing but a walking stick carved from driftwood. His calm presence stood in stark contrast to the entourage of armed guards and sleek machines surrounding the billionaire. His eyes carried no fear, no curiosity, not even judgment, just stillness. William's first words were sharp. You're Elijah. I am the healer, replied, voice low and measured. William looked around, scanning the humble hut, the palm-thatched roof, the clay pots resting beside a fire pit. This is where the miracles happen, he said, his tone half mocking. Elijah didn't answer. He only gestured to a wooden stool near the doorway. If you came to talk, you may sit. If you came to buy, you may leave. William frowned. You have no idea who you're speaking to. I don't need to, Elijah said. Titles don't heal. Truth does. That answer threw William off balance. For the first time in years, someone spoke to him without flinching, without lowering their voice, without fear. It was disarming. He sat, if only to regain control of the moment. You've heard of me, he said. William Ashford. Ashford Global Holdings. Ashford Energy. Ashford Airlines. Elijah smiled faintly. You sound like a man trying to remind himself he exists. William's eyes narrowed. I didn't come here for philosophy. Then why did you come? For a long moment, William didn't answer. The island breeze carried the scent of herbs and salt, wrapping around the silence between them. Finally, he exhaled. Because I'm dying. Elijah nodded, not with shock or pity, but with quiet understanding. And you think I can stop it? I don't think, William said, his tone hardening again. I know, I've read the stories. I've seen what you did for Navarro. Whatever you did for him, do it for me. Name your price. Elijah turned toward a small wooden table, gently crushing dried leaves into powder. You believe money can command life, he said. But money cannot buy what it once destroyed. William leaned forward. Spare me the riddles. Just tell me what you want. I'll pay you any amount. 100 million. 200. Hell, I'll build you an entire hospital if that's what it takes. Elijah turned, his calm eyes locking onto William's. And what will you build for your soul? That question silenced him. For a man who had built empires, that was something he'd never even thought to construct. Elijah stepped closer, studying him the way a doctor studies a wound. Your sickness runs deeper than blood or bone. You've spent your life owning everything and in the process, you lost yourself. William's temper flared. You don't know me. I know the look of a man who has everything except peace, Elijah said quietly, and that sickness can kill faster than any disease. William stood abruptly. Enough. His voice cut through the air. You think words can save me? You think peace can cure terminal illness? Elijah met his anger with stillness. I think you came here hoping it could. For a moment, neither man spoke. The only sound was the rustle of the trees and the soft crackle of firewood. Then William laughed cold, bitter, defensive. You know what? Fine. Let's make this simple. He stepped closer, his presence looming. Heal me, and I'll marry you. The words fell from his mouth like a challenge, like a dare hurled at the universe itself. Elijah blinked, then chuckled, softly and amused, almost sorrowful laugh. You don't even know what you're offering. William's lips curled into a half smile. I'm offering you the world, my wealth, my name, my empire, all of it if you can give me my life back. Elijah shook his head, smiling faintly. You think healing is a transaction. You offer marriage as if it were a contract, not a covenant. You speak like a man who's forgotten what love means. William snapped. Don't preach to me about love. I buried that word with my first wife. For a heartbeat, the healer's calm cracked his eyes flickered with empathy. Then perhaps that's where your healing must begin. William turned away, frustrated, pacing like a caged lion. I didn't come here for therapy. No, Elijah said softly, you came here for truth. And the truth is this: if you want to live, you must learn to stop owning and start belonging. Belonging to what? To life, Elijah replied. To the part of yourself that's still capable of feeling something real. William scoffed. You talk like a poet. But I came here to live, not listen to verses. Elijah smiled gently. Then live differently. The simplicity of the answer cut deeper than any argument. William's arrogance wavered for a moment, and behind it, something fragile stirred: fear. The kind of fear that money can't silence. He looked around the hut, at the rough walls, the firelight flickering against clay jars, the air thick with the scent of sage. Everything here was so alive in a way his world wasn't. No noise, no chaos, no greed, just life breathing, still and unbought, for the first time in years. William didn't know what to say. Elijah turned back to his herbs, his voice calm. You may stay here tonight. The island has a way of showing a man who he really is. If you're willing to listen, you might begin to hear yourself again. William frowned. And if I'm not? Elijah smiled faintly. Then the island will send you home, but not healed. The billionaire stood there in silence, the firelight dancing across his face. He wanted to argue, to demand, to dominate this man as he had dominated every other in his life. But something in Elijah's presence made that impossible. Power didn't work here. Money didn't matter. The usual weapons of his world had no meaning in this one. He finally exhaled and sat back down. Exhaustion slowly replacing anger. You really believe you can fix what science couldn't? Elijah poured water into a small wooden cup and handed it to him. Science treats the body. I treat the truth. Which one do you think is sicker? William took the cup hesitantly, then drank. The water was warm, flavored with something earthy and sharp. It felt alive. That night, as the crickets sang and the stars glowed above the island, William lay awake in a hammock outside the hut. The waves whispered against the shore, and for the first time in years, he listened to something other than the ticking of a clock. He thought of Elijah's words. Stop owning. Start belonging. He didn't know why those words bothered him or why they felt true. Inside the hut, Elijah sat by the dying fire, staring into the embers. He had seen many souls cross his path, but none quite like this man. There was darkness in William, yes, but also a spark. A tiny light buried under years of greed and grief. He whispered to the night. He came asking for life. But what he truly needs is to remember how to live. The sea answered in silence, carrying the weight of what was to come. And as the dawn began to rise, neither man knew that those arrogant, careless words, heal me, and I'll marry you, would soon become a prophecy neither of them could escape. The sun rose heavy over the island, spilling gold across the ocean, but for William Ashford, morning brought no warmth. His face, once sharp with pride, was pale. His hands trembled slightly as he tried to steady a glass of water. The sickness inside him was spreading faster than the doctors had predicted. Every breath burned like fire in his chest. Days had passed since his first encounter with Elijah, the quiet man who had refused his money and mocked his arrogance with calm wisdom. William had tried to ignore the healer's words, but the island had a way of silencing everything except truth. Now, as the wind pressed through the palm leaves, William sat outside the hut. watching the ocean like a man staring down time itself. His empire, his jets, his skyscrapers, his endless wealth felt like ghosts fading from memory. All that remained was his body and its betrayal. Elijah emerged from the trees, carrying a basket of herbs. His steps were slow, deliberate, peaceful, like a man who had never known rush. "You didn't sleep," Elijah said softly, setting the basket down. William gave a weak laugh. "Hard to sleep when your body's planning your funeral." Elijah knelt beside him, his eyes calm. "Maybe your body's not dying. Maybe it's just trying to teach your soul to stop running." William groaned, frustrated. "Not this again. I didn't come here for parables, Elijah. I came here to live." Elijah met his eyes. "Then start living." "By what?" "Eating roots and meditating under trees." William snapped. "I'm dying, man. Do you understand that?" Elijah didn't flinch. "Yes," he said quietly, "but I also understand something you don't. The body can't heal where the heart still hides." William turned away, shaking his head. "You think my heart is the problem? Fine, name your price. I'll give you anything: money, land, whatever you want." Elijah said nothing. William's voice rose, desperate now. "Do you hear me? Anything? I'll sign over half my fortune if that's what it takes. Hell." He paused, his eyes glistening with the edge of panic. "I'll even keep my word. Heal me, and I'll marry you." The words hung in the air again, heavier this time, not as a boast, but as a plea. His voice cracked, and for the first time, the billionaire sounded human. Elijah looked at him, compassion softening his expression. "You would promise devotion to a stranger, just to escape death." William's throat tightened. "You think I care about devotion? I just want to live." "You can have everything I own, Elijah. Everything. Don't let me die." Elijah rose slowly, the firelight catching his eyes. "Then it's not life you want. It's control. You're still trying to own what can't be bought." William's jaw clenched. "Then tell me what can be done." The healer turned toward the ocean, as if the answer was somewhere beyond the waves. After a long silence, he said, "I will help you, but not on your terms." William looked up sharply. "Meaning?" "You will stay here for 40 days, Elijah said. "No business, no phones, no assistants, no lies. You will eat what I eat, walk where I walk, and live as I live." William stared at him, stunned. 40 days. "That's impossible." "I can't," Elijah cut in gently. "Then you don't truly want to be healed. Do you have any idea what 40 days costs me?" "Yes," Elijah replied. "But do you have any idea what your sickness has already cost your soul?" The words struck like thunder. William tried to argue, but the truth was already sinking into him. He thought of the boardrooms, the empty houses, the shallow handshakes, the late nights, staring at numbers instead of faces. Somewhere, deep down, he knew Elijah was right. He exhaled, defeated. "And if I do this, you'll heal me." Elijah shook his head. "No, I'll teach you to be healed." That distinction made William frown. "You're not a doctor. You're a philosopher with herbs." Elijah smiled faintly. "And yet, you came to me when the doctors gave up." William had no answer for that. The day stretched on in heavy silence. Elijah showed him how to mix herbs, how to crush leaves into tea, how to breathe slowly and deeply until the tension left his chest. William tried, but impatience followed every motion. He wasn't used to waiting for anything, not results, not people, not life itself. As night fell, the two men sat by the fire. Crickets sang in the distance, and the stars blinked above them, like distant cities. Elijah handed William a small wooden bowl filled with warm broth. "Drink," he said, "not because it will heal you, but because it will remind you what nourishment feels like." William sipped reluctantly. "It tastes like grass," Elijah chuckled. "Then it's working." William looked into the flames, his voice low. "You really believe this? Simple life can fix what's broken inside me." "I believe the simple life shows you what was never broken to begin with," Elijah replied. The words unsettled William, yet comforted him at the same time. There was something maddeningly peaceful about Elijah's certainty, like he was speaking from somewhere far deeper than logic. Days began to blend into each other. The billionaire learned to fetch water from the stream, to cook without servants, to listen without speaking. Each task humbled him in ways money never could. He hated it at first, the sweat, the dirt, the silence, but slowly, something began to shift. The pain in his chest dulled. His breathing eased. His nights, once haunted by nightmares of hospitals and contracts, began to quiet. He didn't understand how or why, but he felt different. One evening, while collecting firewood, William paused by the ocean. The water shimmered beneath the moonlight, endless and for the first time in years, he felt small, and somehow that didn't scare him. Elijah joined him, walking silently beside him. "You see it now," he said. "See what? The truth. That healing begins the moment you stop fighting for control." William's voice softened. "You make it sound easy." "It's not," Elijah said, smiling. "That's why few survive it." William looked at him, confused. "Survive healing?" Elijah turned to face him. "When a man loses his money, he mourns it. But when a man loses his power, he meets himself." William didn't speak again. The words sank into him like medicine he didn't yet understand. As the days passed, the billionaire's arrogance faded, replaced by quiet reflection. Sometimes Elijah would catch him staring at the horizon, his face calm, almost peaceful. Other times, he'd wake in the middle of the night, sweating and trembling, haunted by memories of who he used to be. On the 40th evening, as the sun melted into the sea, William stood outside the hut, breathing deeply. His skin glowed with color again. His hands were steady. His heartbeat dashed strong. Elijah stepped beside him. "How do you feel?" William smiled faintly. "Alive." For the first time in a long time, Elijah nodded. Then the 40 days were worth it. William turned toward him, eyes filled with gratitude, and something else, something deeper. "You saved me, Elijah. I owe you my life." Elijah looked at him softly. "Then live it differently. That's the only repayment I ask." The billionaire hesitated. "You really think I can change?" Elijah's gaze was steady. "You already have." The wind stirred between them, warm and light. William looked out over the ocean, again this time not as an owner, but as a man reborn. But as the last light of day vanished beyond the horizon, a flicker of uncertainty crossed his eyes. He didn't yet know what the world would look like when he returned, or what it would demand of the new man he had become. And deep inside, a whisper of fate reminded him, the true test of healing isn't found in stillness, but in what waits when you go back. The first dawn on the island came quietly. A pale ribbon of light stretched over the horizon, painting the ocean in silver. Waves whispered against the shore. The world seemed calm, but inside William Ashford, war was brewing. He woke in a small bamboo hut, the kind he'd once have paid millions to demolish for a beachfront resort. The bed was rough, made of woven straw. No silk sheets, no AC, no staff waiting outside with coffee. Only the sound of roosters, and the smell of salt and damp wood. William sat up, groaning. His back ached. His body screamed for comfort. He looked around, bewildered. "This is supposed to make me better?" he muttered, rubbing his temples. Elijah's voice came from the doorway, calm, patient. "Good morning." William glared at him. "Good. My spine disagrees." Elijah chuckled softly. "Pain means you're still alive. It's a good start." He handed William a clay cup filled with steaming green liquid. The billionaire sniffed it and grimaced. "What is this?" "Boiled grass. Elixir of life," Elijah said with a teasing smile. "Or, as you'd call it, herbal tea." William sighed and took a hesitant sip. The taste was earthy, bitter like medicine, and mud mixed with regret. "God, this is awful." "Exactly," Elijah replied. "The body doesn't always like what heals it." The day began, and for the first time in his life, William Ashford had no schedule, no meetings, no noise, only the rhythm of nature and the strange man who led him through it. Each morning, Elijah made him rise with the sun. They walked barefoot along the shoreline, the sand cold beneath their feet. Elijah instructed him to breathe deeply, to listen to the ocean until the mind grows quiet. William hated every second of it. His thoughts refused to silence. They screamed of deadlines, stocks, and unfinished deals. He missed the chaos. He missed control. "This is pointless," he said one morning. After the fifth failed attempt at meditation. Elijah didn't even look up. "Then sit in the pointlessness until it teaches you something." William rolled his eyes. "You sound like one of those motivational posters." Elijah smiled. "Maybe, but those posters don't cook you breakfast." Despite himself, William laughed a small, reluctant laugh. It was the first real one in weeks. Days turned into a quiet pattern of discomfort and discovery. William learned to tend a small fire, to crush herbs with his hands, to eat meals without utensils. He bathed in cold river water, cursed the mosquitoes, and learned how to breathe through hunger and heat. At night, he lay under a roof of leaves, staring at stars he hadn't seen in decades. He'd once flown above them in private jets, but never really looked. One evening, as Elijah sat by the fire grinding herbs, William asked, "Why do you live like this? You could have gone to the city, made a fortune with your healing." Elijah's eyes stayed fixed on his hands. "A man who heals for money soon forgets what sickness feels like. I'd rather stay human." William leaned back, studying him. "You think I've forgotten?" Elijah looked up then, meeting his eyes. "You built walls so high, you can't even hear your own heartbeat." The billionaire fell silent. He wanted to argue but couldn't. By the second week, something began to change. The constant ache in William's chest started to ease. His color returned. He could breathe a little deeper, walk a little farther. The herbs, the air, the silence somehow. They were working, but every step forward came with resistance. There were nights when old habits fought back, when he'd wake in panic, reaching for a phone that wasn't there. Nights when he'd see flashes of his old life, board meetings, red carpets, the face of a woman he once loved but drove away. He began to see how empty it all had been, how much noise he'd built just to drown out silence. One afternoon, after hours of manual work, William collapsed under the shade of a palm tree, sweating and shaking. "Elijah," he gasped, "this is ridiculous. I'm not built for this." Elijah knelt beside him, offering water. "You're built for survival. You've just forgotten how I don't survive," William said bitterly. "I conquer." Elijah smiled faintly. "And where has conquering gotten you?" William didn't answer. His breath came uneven, his chest tight. He wanted to be angry, but all he felt was tired. Days passed. The island became quieter, or maybe it was William who had changed. He stopped complaining as much. He stopped counting the hours. One dawn, Elijah found him sitting alone on a rock, staring at the sunrise. His back straight, his hands still, couldn't sleep. Elijah asked. William shook his head. Didn't want to. Peaceful. Elijah nodded. That's the body, remembering how to rest. William turned to him. You really think this whole jungle therapy is curing me? Elijah smiled. No, you are curing you. I'm just reminding you how. William stared at him, searching his face. You talk like you've done this before. Elijah's voice lowered. Once, for someone I loved. There was something in his tone of quiet pain that made William pause. He wanted to ask more, but Elijah stood and walked away, leaving the mystery hanging in the air. By the third week, the transformation became undeniable. The billionaire who once barked orders now listened when Elijah spoke. The man who sneered at herbs now prepared them himself. He was thinner, calmer, more human, but healing was never meant to be easy. One night, a storm broke over the island. Rain poured like heaven's wrath, thunder shaking the hut. William woke in a cold sweat, his chest seizing again, old fear flooding back. Elijah, he shouted through the rain. The healer rushed in with a lamp. Breathe, he ordered. Don't fight it. Just breathe. I can't, William gasped. Double quotes. Yes, you can. In through the nose, out through the pain. For what felt like an eternity, William obeyed. His body trembled. His breath came ragged. Then slowly, miraculously, the tightness loosened. The air returned. When it was over, he collapsed into Elijah's arms, exhausted. Tears streamed down his face, uninvited and raw. I thought I was dying again, William whispered. Elijah held him steady. No, you were being reborn. The storm faded by dawn. The air smelled of wet earth and renewal. William stood outside, weak but alive, staring at the sunrise that painted the world in gold. He realized something profound, that healing wasn't just herbs or discipline. It was surrender. It was letting go of everything that once defined him. He whispered to himself, maybe this is what life was supposed to feel like all along. Elijah appeared beside him, his expression calm. You've come far, he said, but remembered true healing isn't about getting back what you lost. It's about finding what you were missing. William looked out at the endless sea, the wind brushing against his face. He nodded slowly. Then maybe it's time I learn who that man really is. Elijah smiled, the firelight of dawn glowing in his eyes. Then your 40 days have truly begun. The ocean roared in the distance as the sun climbed higher. William took a deep breath, steady, full, alive. For the first time, he wasn't a billionaire chasing miracles. He was simply a man, learning to live again, but far beyond the waves. Unseen and waiting, destiny had already begun its next move. The island had a strange silence that night. The sea moved softly under the moonlight, and a thin fog rolled through the palm trees. Inside the small hut, a single oil lamp burned beside William Ashford's bed. His skin glistened with sweat, his breath shallow and uneven. The fever had come fast, as if all the pain he had buried for years was now clawing its way to the surface. Elijah sat beside him, his hands steady, his face calm but watchful. He had seen this before, when healing reached its breaking point. The body fought back, William groaned, twisting under the thin blanket. It's burning, he gasped. God, make it stop. Elijah placed a cool cloth on his forehead. Breathe, William. Let your body speak. William's voice cracked. It's not my body. It's something else. It feels like I'm being punished. Elijah looked into his fevered eyes. Sometimes pain isn't punishment. It's remembrance. For a long moment, only the sound of waves and William's ragged breathing filled the air. Then, through the haze of delirium, William began to talk not to Elijah, but to something deeper inside himself. I was 9 when my father left, he whispered. Said he was going to find work. He never came back. My mother worked herself to the bone, 3 jobs. No sleep, no food. We lived on nothing. And every night, I swore to myself, I'd never be poor again. His voice shook with old anger. You don't know what it's like, Elijah, to beg for what other people waste. To watch your mother cry because you can't afford medicine. Elijah listened silently, eyes steady. And that's why you built your empire. William nodded weakly. I started with nothing. Slept in my car, ate instant noodles, worked 16 hours a day. People laughed at me, but I made it. I arose. I showed them all. He coughed hard, his body trembling. Elijah held him up, pouring water to his lips. Easy now. You don't have to prove anything here. But William's voice grew sharper, desperate. You think I did all this for pride? No, I did it to never feel powerless again. But it never ends. Elijah, the more I built, the more I feared losing it. He looked away, tears slipping down his temples. I thought money would buy peace, but all it bought me was noise. Elijah placed a hand over his heart. You tried to fill a wound with gold, William, but gold can't stop bleeding. The billionaire's face softened. His defenses were breaking. For the first time, he didn't argue. He didn't deny, he just lay there raw, fragile, human. Elijah began to grind fresh herbs, murmuring words in a language William didn't recognize. The scent of basil, turmeric, and smoke filled the room. The healer placed a warm cloth soaked in the mixture on William's chest. Your sickness, Elijah said quietly, isn't just in your blood, it's in the stories you keep telling yourself. Stories of power, fear, and loss. You built your world to protect yourself from pain, but in doing so, you caged your soul. William blinked slowly. His eyes glistened in the flickering light. Then tell me, how do I let it go? Elijah leaned closer. You stop fighting life. You start forgiving it. William turned his face away. I don't know how. Then start small, Elijah whispered. Forgive the boy who is afraid. The billionaire's lips trembled. He closed his eyes, his breath quivering. And for the first time in decades, William Ashford cried not out of pride or pain, but release. The night deepened. His fever climbed. His body shook violently as if purging every memory he had locked away. Elijah stayed beside him, unmoving, whispering prayers into the dark. He placed his hands gently on William's chest, his voice low, steady. You are not your wealth. You are not your illness. You are more than what you lost. Hours passed. The lamp flickered out. The only light left was the silver moon bleeding through the cracks in the walls. William's breathing slowed, his mind drifting between dreams and confession. In that twilight space, he saw faces his mother's, smiling through exhaustion. His father's back as he walked away. His business partners, shaking hands with betrayal behind their eyes. He saw himself young, hungry, ruthless. Then he saw the emptiness behind every success. The hollow victories, the silence of penthouses built too high for human voices to reach. He whispered hoarsely, I've been running my whole life. Elijah's voice answered softly, then stop running. Be still, and let what's chasing you catch up. William's breathing slowed even more. He fell into deep, trembling sleep. Elijah stayed awake, eyes watching him, as the fire slowly turned to ash dot when dawn finally broke. The fever had broken too. William stirred, his skin cool, his breathing calm. He opened his eyes to find Elijah still there, sitting beside him, his hands folded in silent prayer. For a moment, William simply stared, confused, disoriented, yet grateful. You state, he whispered. Elijah smiled faintly. Healing doesn't take breaks. William tried to sit up. You prayed all night. I did. Because you needed someone to believe in your life while you were ready to give it up. William's throat tightened. You didn't have to. Elijah's eyes met his. Neither did you. But you're still here. The words hit him harder than any medicine could. The morning light filled the hut, golden and soft. William looked down at his hands, steadier now, stronger. It's strange, he said. I feel lighter, like something left me. Elijah nodded. It did. The past can't live in a heart that's learning peace. Silence followed, but it wasn't the uneasy kind. It was sacred, still, full of understanding. Later that day, as they walked along the beach, Elijah asked quietly, do you ever think of going back? William hesitated. Back to what? To the man you were. William looked out at the horizon. I don't even recognize him anymore. Elijah smiled. Then maybe that's the cure you came for. The ocean breeze brushed between them, carrying away the last echoes of the night before. William felt his lungs open wider, his heart beat slower. For the first time, he wasn't thinking about deadlines or contracts. He was just there. As the sun began to set, he glanced at Elijah. You said something the other day, that healing isn't just about medicine, it's about truth. I think I'm starting to understand. Elijah's eyes softened. Good, because truth hurts before it heals. William chuckled lightly. That, I've learned the hard way. They both laughed, a sound free of tension, full of quiet companionship. But as the laughter faded, Elijah's face grew thoughtful. Your journey isn't over, William. The fever broke, but the real test begins when the world tries to take back what you've learned. William nodded slowly. Then, I'll be ready. Elijah turned to him with a half smile. You will, because the man behind the money has finally met himself. The last light of day poured over the ocean, turning the water into molten gold. William stood silently, watching the horizon where the sky met the sea. And the old met the new. He didn't know what waited beyond the 40 days. He didn't know what his life would look like when he returned. But one thing had changed forever. For the first time in his life, he wasn't afraid to lose. Because for the first time, he had found something worth keeping. The first light of dawn spilled across the island, painting the waves gold. The sea was calm that morning, calmer than it had been in weeks, and for the first time since his arrival. William Ashford woke without pain clawing through his chest. He sat up slowly, expecting the familiar ache to return. But it didn't. The air was cool, gentle, almost cleansing. Outside, Elijah was already awake, tending to the fire, humming a soft tune that drifted like smoke through the morning breeze. William stepped out, barefoot on the sand. The world felt different, brighter, more alive. Morning, Elijah said, without looking up. William nodded. Morning, you slept well. Better than I have in years, William admitted, almost surprised by the truth of it. Elijah smiled faintly. Then the body is listening. William frowned slightly. Listening to what it's been ignoring, Elijah replied. Peace. For a moment, William didn't know how to respond. Peace. It was a word he'd spent his life chasing through noise and chaos, through boardrooms and bank accounts, And now, somehow, in this quiet, it had found him. As days passed, his strength began to return. Slowly, at first, a steadier heartbeat, clearer breath, a lighter step. Elijah didn't rush him. He gave him tasks, carrying baskets of herbs, stirring soups for the villagers, walking through the gardens to gather roots under the sun. At first, William found it absurd. A man who had owned skyscrapers was now washing bowls in a hut. But strangely, it felt right. The rhythm of simplicity began to heal something deeper than flesh. One afternoon, he stood beside Elijah in the small herbal field, the scent of mint and sage rising in the heat. Elijah handed him a basket. "Here," he said, "pull the roots gently, not by force. If you rush, you'll break what you're trying to save." William chuckled softly. "You sound like a philosopher." Elijah smiled. "Only a gardener who's watched too many men destroy what they're trying to grow." William crouched down, imitating his movements. The soil was warm under his fingers. Each pull felt careful, deliberate, and as he worked, he realized something. His hands no longer trembled. The weakness that once defined him was slipping away, replaced by a quiet steadiness he hadn't known in years. He looked up. Elijah was watching him with that knowing, patient smile. "What?" William asked. "Nothing," Elijah said. "Just good to see life coming back into you." William's gaze softened. "Maybe it never left. Maybe I just buried it under all the wrong things." Elijah nodded slowly. "Wealth has a way of building walls around the heart. Healing begins when you start breaking them." That evening, they sat by the fire, surrounded by laughter from the local children. Elijah handed out bowls of soup while William stirred the pot, sweat glistening on his forehead. A little girl tugged at his sleeve and asked shyly, "Are you the sick man?" William froze. He looked down at her innocent face. "I was," he said quietly, "but I'm getting better." She smiled wide. "Then God is listening." The words hit him harder than she could have known. Later that night, William watched the children eat, their faces lit by firelight, their joy unshaken by poverty. He felt something stir inside him, something warm, unfamiliar. "Do they come here every night?" he asked. Elijah nodded. "They have little to eat at home. The garden feeds them." William's brow furrowed. "You do this alone." "With the help of whoever remembers that giving is part of healing," Elijah said simply. William looked at him, then at the children again. Without another word, he reached into the pocket of his worn shirt and pulled out a leather wallet, something he hadn't touched since arriving. Inside were only a few bills he had carried from the city. To him, it was nothing, but to them, what's everything? He walked over to a woman sitting near the fire, her face thin, her son coughing softly beside her. "He's sick," Elijah whispered. "Fever's been rising for days." William hesitated, then knelt beside her. "Take this," he said, offering the money. "Get him whatever medicine he needs." The woman looked startled. "No, sir. We can't, please," William interrupted gently. "It's not charity, it's thanks." She took the money with trembling hands, tears welling in her eyes. "Bless you," she whispered. "May your own sickness leave you forever." As she spoke, William felt a strange rush through his body, not pain, not weakness, but a surge of warmth that seemed to move straight through his chest. He gasped slightly, pressing a hand to his heart. Elijah noticed immediately. "What is it?" William exhaled slowly. It's strange. It feels like something's changing." Elijah nodded knowingly. "Healing starts when giving costs you something. You just traded a piece of your wealth for a piece of your soul back." William sat quietly, staring into the fire. His mind replayed every deal he had made, every lie he had told, every wall he had built to keep himself safe. None of them had ever brought him this feeling. Peace, that's what it was. Not power, not control. Peace. Over the next days, that feeling deepened. William began laughing again, real laughter, the kind that came from somewhere pure. He teased Elijah about his stubborn rituals, and Elijah teased him about his clumsy attempts at cooking. One morning, William woke before dawn and stepped outside. The horizon was painted in pink and gold. The ocean shimmered. He closed his eyes and took a deep breath of the salty air. For the first time, he didn't feel like a billionaire or a patient. He felt human. Later that day, he helped Elijah rebuild a section of the garden fence that had fallen during a storm. As they worked, Elijah said quietly, "You look different these days." William grinned. "Better or worse?" "Wiser," Elijah said. "The sickness is leaving you, not just from your body, but from your heart." William leaned on the fence post, catching his breath. "You were right, Elijah. I thought healing meant fixing the body, but it's more than that, isn't it?" Elijah smiled. "It's remembering who you were before the pain began." The words hung in the air like sunlight through trees. That evening, William stood by the sea, the tide brushing over his feet. He thought about his skyscrapers, his boardrooms, the people who once feared him, envied him, obeyed him. For years, that power had defined him. But standing here barefoot, nameless, alive, he realized something. Power without peace was just another sickness. He looked up at the sky and whispered to himself, "Maybe true wealth was never what I owned. Maybe it's what I can finally let go of." Behind him, Elijah's voice carried softly through the wind. "Then your healing has truly begun." William turned to him, smiling faintly. Feels like it. The waves rolled in again, washing away footprints, leaving only the endless shimmer of the sea. And as the last light of day melted into night, William Ashford, the man who once believed money could buy anything, stood quietly in the stillness, realizing that some cures are found not in medicine, but in mercy. The air on the island was heavy with peace. For weeks, William had risen with the sun, worked beside Elijah, eaten from the garden, and felt his body return to strength. His laughter had begun to echo through the trees, his voice lighter, freer, but peace, as Elijah often said, is the most fragile thing in the world. And one morning, it shattered. A sleek black helicopter broke through the silence of the coast, its blades cutting the sky like knives. The villagers stared in awe as it descended near the beach, stirring clouds of sand and salt. Elijah stood at the edge of the path, watching calmly. William, hearing the noise, froze where he was, a basket of herbs in his hands. His past had found him. When the helicopter door opened, a tall woman in a gray suit stepped out, sharp, efficient, the kind of person who lived in constant motion. "Mr. Ashford," she called out, her voice strained with urgency. "We need to talk. It's an emergency." William blinked, the words snapping him back to the world he thought he had left behind. He set the basket down slowly and walked toward her. "Catherine." "Sir," she said, her face pale. "I've been looking for you for weeks. The company, it's collapsing." The word collapsing hung in the air like thunder. She continued, her words spilling fast. "The board's lost confidence. Stock's down 40%. They're voting to remove you as CEO tomorrow. We need you back." Now, for a long moment, William said nothing. He glanced over at Elijah, who remained silent, his expression unreadable. "Please," Catherine urged. "Without you, everything you've built will fall apart." William's mind raced. Everything I built. He could almost hear the ticking of old clocks, the hum of boardrooms, the rustle of contracts. His empire, his legacy crumbling without him. Elijah finally spoke, his voice quiet but firm. "If what you built cannot stand without you, perhaps it was never meant to last." Catherine turned to him sharply. "And who are you to say that?" Elijah smiled gently, a man who's seen sickness in many forms. Some wear suits. William shot him a warning glance. "Elijah, please, not now." But Elijah didn't move. The rule was simple. "William, 40 days. No business. No lies. You promised." "I know what I promised," William said, his voice rising. "But this is my life we're talking about." Elijah looked at him with calm eyes. "No, this is your old life, trying to drag you back." The silence between them thickened. That night, William sat by the shore, the ocean dark and restless. His phone brought to him by Catherine lay in his hand like a forbidden fruit. He had kept his word for 30 days. 30 days of stillness, humility, healing. But now, the temptation gnawed at him. He could hear Elijah's voice in his head. "You can't serve two masters. Peace and power don't share the same throne." William stared at the phone screen, the company name glowing in the darkness. A single press, a single call, and he could stop the collapse. Or, so he believed. He hesitated. Then, slowly, he pressed the button. "Get me the board," he said quietly, when his assistant answered. "Tell them, I'm back." It was the first lie he had spoken in weeks. At first, it felt like nothing. Just the hum of old power, returning to his veins. He made call after call, giving orders, making promises, fighting for control. But with every word, something inside him began to twist. His breath grew shallow. His chest tightened. Sweat broke across his forehead. "Elijah was right," whispered a small voice inside him. "You can't heal and hold on at the same time." Within minutes, pain surged through him, sharp, merciless. He dropped the phone, gasping. Elijah appeared at the door, his eyes heavy with disappointment. "You called them," he said softly. William clutched his chest. They needed me." Elijah walked closer, kneeling beside him. "And now, what do you need?" William's breath trembled. "Help me." Elijah took his hand. "You broke the rule, William. You fed the sickness again. Your body remembers what your heart just forgot." William's strength began to fade. Catherine rushed to his side, panic in her voice. "He needs a doctor." Elijah shook his head. "No doctor can help him if he keeps feeding what's killing him." "Then what do we do?" she demanded. Elijah looked at William, his tone calm but stern. "You must choose. Go back to that world, or stay here and finish what you started. But you cannot have both." William tried to speak, but his voice cracked. The pain was unbearable, as if the sickness had been waiting, lurking for this moment to strike again. Through the haze of agony, memories flashed before his eyes. His father's disapproving face, his first deal, the partners who betrayed him, the night spent alone in penthouse silence. Every victory had been a chain, every dollar a weight. He finally whispered, "I don't know who I am without it." Elijah squeezed his hand. "Then maybe that's what you need to learn." The night grew quiet. The helicopter waited in the distance, its lights blinking like a dying star. Catherine stood, torn between duty and compassion. "Sir," she said gently, "if we leave now, we can still make the meeting." William looked up at her, eyes clouded with pain. "No," he said weakly, "if I leave now, I'll never come back." Catherine froze. Then what should I tell them? He smiled faintly, tears glistening. Tell them, the king has stepped down. Elijah helped him back to the bed, laying cool cloths over his forehead. You've been fighting for control your whole life, he said. Now, try surrendering. William's breathing steady. His pulse began to slow. For hours, Elijah sat beside him in silence, the ocean whispering just beyond the window. By dawn, William stirred again, weak but alive. The phone lay shattered on the floor, half buried in sand. Elijah poured him a cup of water and said quietly, you don't have to fix the world you broke. You just have to stop breaking yourself. William nodded faintly. I understand now. Every time I chased power, I lost a piece of my soul. And every time I let go, I started to heal. Elijah smiled, setting the cup down. Then maybe the cure isn't what you thought it was. William turned toward the rising sun. Maybe it was never in my body at all. The waves rolled gently against the shore, as if erasing the noise of the night before. The helicopter was gone. The calls had ended. Only silence and a fragile, new beginning remained. And as the light warmed his face, William closed his eyes and whispered, this time, I choose peace. Night fell over the village like a heavy curtain. The jungle outside whispered in restless winds, and the oil lamps inside Elijah's hut flickered, their light dancing over William's face. He had spent the entire evening pretending everything was fine, helping children draw in the dirt, laughing, even humming as he cleaned the herbs. But something inside him had already begun to rot again. His phone, hidden under the straw mat, still carried the poison of the world he'd left behind. His assistant's panicked words from days ago echoed in his mind. Sir, the board is meeting without you. They're replacing you. You're losing everything. William thought he could handle it. He thought he could cheat the lesson, heal, and still hold on to what he'd built. But the body does not lie. It started with a tremor, a small, harmless shake of his hand as he reached for water. Then his chest tightened like an iron claw gripping his lungs. He stumbled forward, gasping, his vision blurred, and before he could call for help, his body collapsed to the ground with a hollow thud. The bowl of medicine shattered. Elijah rushed from the other room, his robe flaring as he knelt beside him. He turned the billionaire's head gently, checking his pulse. Breathe, my friend, breathe. But William's lips had already turned pale. His pulse raced like a cornered animal. Sweat rolled down his temple. His eyes flickered between life and the dark. Elijah, he croaked. It's happening again. Elijah's expression hardened, calm but cutting. What did you do? William shook his head weakly. Nothing. But Elijah's eyes had already shifted toward the straw mat. With one sharp tug, he pulled it aside. The phone gleamed in the lamplight like a serpent. Elijah stared at it for a long moment. Then, softly, you called them. William's throat tightened. I had to. Everything I built, it's dying. My name, my legacy, your sickness. Elijah interrupted. Feeds on that very thing. The words hit like a strike of thunder. He placed his palm on William's chest, not to heal, but to listen. Your heart beats fast, but not from illness. From fear, you still believe that saving your empire will save you. William tried to sit up, clutching Elijah's wrist. You don't understand. That company is my life. Without it, who am I? Elijah met his eye steady, unmoving. You are the man beneath the empire. The man you've spent your whole life trying to bury. The air grew heavier. Outside, the wind howled as if the jungle itself was listening. Elijah rose and began crushing herbs into a bowl, his voice low but fierce. When I first saw you, you were dying not from disease, but from hunger, a hunger for more, for control. That hunger is your illness, William. Every time you feed it, your body starves for peace. William's breaths grew shorter, more erratic. He gripped the edge of the bed, his knuckles white. Then what do I do? Elijah turned toward him, eyes burning through the dim light. You surrender. Not your wealth, not your power. You surrender yourself. The billionaire stared at him, confusion mixing with terror. Surrender myself. Yes, Elijah said, his tone like a whisper through stone. Let go of the man who always wants more, the one who thinks healing is something he can buy, control, or promise away. Until you give him up, your body will never be free. William's voice cracked, half broken, half pleading. If I let go, I lose everything. Elijah's hands paused over the bowl. Maybe losing everything, he said softly, is the only way to finally live. Silence. Only the rhythmic sound of the pestle-grinding herbs filled the hut. William's mind, flooded with memories, helicopters, champagne, the sound of applause when he signed billion-dollar deals. And yet, every image faded into the same emptiness he had tried to escape when he first came here. He closed his eyes. Elijah, I can't. Elijah knelt again beside him. Then the sickness will finish what your greed began. William's body convulsed. He gasped, his hand clutching his heart. Please, he whispered, help me. Elijah gripped his hand, steady and strong. Then say it. Say you're done running. Say you surrender not to me, but to the truth. Tears welled in William's eyes. His lips trembled. I surrender. Elijah leaned closer. Say it as if your life depends on it, because it does. William's voice broke, rising from somewhere deep inside, raw and trembling. I surrender. My name, my wealth, my pride. All of it. I'm done fighting. Take it. All of it. And for the first time since arriving in that village, his body went still, not in weakness, but in release. Elijah exhaled slowly, placing a hand over William's heart. Good, he murmured. Now, healing can finally begin. The room grew quiet. Even the wind outside seemed to settle. Hours passed in silence. The fever broke. The color began to return to William's skin. Elijah sat by the bed, watching him breathe steady, calm, like a man reborn. When dawn finally came, light spilled through the window in soft golden streams. The billionaire stirred, eyes fluttering open. For the first time, he didn't look like a man of power or desperation. He looked human, he whispered. I thought I'd die if I lost everything. Elijah smiled faintly. You did die, but only the part that needed to. William let out a long breath. He felt lighter, quieter, almost empty, but in a way that didn't hurt anymore. Outside, children's laughter drifted in through the open door, and for a moment, he simply listened. Then, in the stillness, Elijah spoke again. Now, William, you are ready to learn what true healing costs. The camera would linger there, the light over William's face. The quiet resolve in Elijah's eyes before fading to black. The storm had passed, but what came next would test not his body, but his soul. The morning air was sharp with salt and silence. Waves rolled against the distant rocks, slow and endless, as if time itself had slowed down to watch. William stood barefoot at the edge of the ocean, his once polished feet now rough from months in the village. The horizon stretched before him, vast, empty, infinite. Behind him, Elijah's voice broke the quiet. It's time. William turned. Elijah stood draped in a simple white cloth, eyes calm but piercing. In his hands, he held a small bowl carved from stone, filled, not with herbs this time, but with seawater. What do I do? William asked softly. Elijah stepped closer. You do nothing, he said. You let go. Those words hung in the air like a challenge. Elijah motioned toward a small hut by the cliffs, a place isolated from the village, where the ocean's voice drowned out all human noise. For 3 days, Elijah continued. You will stay there. No food, no contact, no distractions. You will face everything you have buried, every choice, every sin, every life you stepped over on your way up. William's chest tightened. And what if I can't face them? Elijah's reply was simple. Then your sickness wins. A pause. Then, William nodded. He took one last look at the open sea, before walking toward the hut. The door creaked shut behind him. The first night came quietly. The air was thick, heavy with salt and memories. William sat cross-legged on the floor, eyes closed, trying to focus on his breath. But the moment he did, his mind betrayed him. He saw faces, men he had fired without mercy, partners he had deceived, friends he had forgotten. He heard echoes of boardrooms filled with applause, followed by silence. The same silence that now filled this room. His stomach growled, his lips were dry, and yet, it wasn't hunger that hurt, it was guilt. He whispered into the darkness, Elijah, what if this is all for nothing? But no one answered. Only the wind. By the second day, the visions began. He saw his father, cold, distant, disappointed. He saw himself as a young boy, clutching a paper airplane, standing in front of the mansion gates, dreaming of becoming someone. He saw the moment he stepped over his brother's dreams to build his empire. In the vision, his younger self turned to him and asked, was it worth it? William fell to his knees, trembling. No, he whispered. It wasn't. His voice cracked as tears ran down his face. I wanted to be great. I thought greatness meant never needing anyone, but I was wrong. I was so wrong. The sound of the waves outside grew louder, like the ocean itself was listening, like it was washing his words away into something cleaner. By the third day, he was weak, barely conscious. His lips were cracked. His body shivered with fever. But deep beneath the exhaustion, something else was stirring. Peace. Not the peace that comes from victory or control, the kind that comes from surrender. He lay on the ground, eyes half open, staring at the thin shaft of light spilling through the wooden cracks of the hut. And then, something changed. He felt warmth flood his chest, spreading through his arms, his legs, his veins. His breathing slowed. His heartbeat softened. For the first time, it didn't feel like something was breaking inside him. It felt like something was healing. And in that moment, a memory surfaced. Elijah's voice, calm and certain. Your body will follow wherever your spirit leads. Heal the spirit, and the body will remember. William's tears mixed with the salt of the ocean air. He smiled faintly. Then let it remember, he whispered. Let it be free. And then, darkness. When he awoke, the sun was bright outside. His body was trembling, his throat dry, but he was alive. Truly alive. He pushed the door open and stepped out, barefoot, the wind brushing against his face like an embrace. Down the hill, Elijah stood waiting. William stumbled toward him, his steps unsteady, his body weak, but his eyes glowed with something Elijah hadn't seen before. When he finally reached him, he fell into Elijah's arms, sobbing like a child. Elijah held him close, steady as stone. You faced yourself, he said quietly. That is the hardest battle a man can fight. William pulled back, tears still streaming. It was hell, he said, his voice trembling. But somewhere in that hell, I found peace. Elijah nodded, a faint smile touching his lips. You didn't find peace, William, you became it. Days later, the doctors arrived from the city. They ran their tests, blood scans, everything. William watched silently, detached, almost uninterested. He already knew. When the results came back, the lead doctor looked stunned. It's impossible, he murmured. Your condition, it's gone, completely. William just smiled. No, he said softly, it was never impossible. The room went quiet. He looked at Elijah, who stood at the doorway, arms crossed, expression calm as ever. So this was the cure all along, William said. Not the herbs, not the medicine. Elijah's eyes gleamed. You were never meant to be healed by something. You were meant to be healed into someone. William let those words sink in. They didn't just make sense, they felt true. That night, the two men sat by the ocean, watching the horizon swallow the sun. William spoke after a long silence. You know, I used to believe everything could be bought. Time, health, even love. But when I was dying, all I had left were the things I ignored the most. Elijah turned to him. And what are those? William smiled faintly. Silence, forgiveness, gratitude, life. The sound of the waves filled the pause that followed. Then Elijah said quietly, You've been given your life again, William, but what will you do with it this time? William didn't answer right away. He just looked at his hands, the same hands that once signed billion-dollar deals in for the first time. They didn't feel powerful. They felt human. He closed his eyes and whispered, Maybe I'll finally learn how to live. Elijah nodded slowly. Then your healing is complete. The wind carried their laughter across the shore as night fell. Two men, one who had lost everything, and one who had never needed anything, sitting side by side, bound not by wealth or debt, but by truth. The camera would pull back then, showing the endless stretch of sea, the hut in the distance, and the faint glow of dawn rising beyond the horizon. William's voice would echo one last time. I came here to be healed, but what I found was myself. The ocean had gone quiet. The waves still moved, but softer now, like the world itself was exhaling after a long storm. William stood at the shore, the wind brushing through his hair, the sun warming his face. For the first time in years, he didn't feel the urge to check his watch. There were no meetings waiting for him, no empire demanding his control, only peace, and the faint sound of Elijah's laughter drifting from the village behind him. It had been weeks since the ritual, the night he faced his own ghosts and walked back into the light. The doctors had confirmed what the spirit already knew. He was healed, but William wasn't ready to leave. He couldn't, not yet. Something about the simplicity of this place held him. The way children ran barefoot through the fields, the smell of earth and herbs drying under the sun, the way Elijah spoke to the villagers, not as a man above them, but as one among them. William found himself staying first for days, then weeks. The mornings began early, with the same rhythm that once annoyed him, Elijah's calm voice waking him before sunrise, the sound of roosters crowing in the distance, and the scent of tea simmering on a clay stove. But now, he loved it. He would walk beside Elijah through the dew-covered paths, their feet brushing against the wild grass as the horizon glowed pink and gold. Sometimes they spoke about life, sometimes they said nothing at all. One morning, as they carried baskets of herbs back from the hills, William asked quietly, Elijah, do you ever wonder why I was healed? Elijah smiled without looking at him. You already know the answer. William chuckled. Do I? Yes, Elijah said simply, because you stopped fighting the world and started listening to it. William thought for a moment. You make it sound so easy. Elijah's eyes glimmered. Healing is never easy, but it is always simple. The village began to change in quiet ways after that. With William's help and his fortune, new wells were built, roofs were repaired, and children began learning under the shade of a great tree Elijah once used for prayer. But the project that transformed the village most was the small clinic Elijah suggested. At first, William hesitated. A clinic, he said. I thought you didn't believe in hospitals. Elijah grinned. I don't believe in soulless ones. So together, they built one that had both medicine and mercy. The walls were painted in warm colors, the windows open to the wind. There was no line between healer and patient, only people helping people. Every day, villagers would come, some for herbs, others for hope. And William worked beside them. He carried water, he helped grind roots, he washed the floors. To the villagers, it was strange at first to see a man once worshipped by the world bending down to clean clay bowls, but Elijah only smiled and said, He's learning to serve what once served him. And that was true. One afternoon, as the sun dipped low, Elijah found William sitting outside the clinic, carving something from wood. What are you making? Elijah asked. William smiled. A sign for the clinic. He turned it around, revealing the words carved in neat, deliberate strokes, the house of healing. Elijah traced the letters with his fingers, then looked at him with quiet pride. You've changed, William. William exhaled, gazing out at the horizon. No, I think I just remembered who I was before I became someone else. Elijah nodded. Then perhaps your sickness had a purpose after all. The next day, a group of visitors arrived from the city for more employees. Assistants, people from William's old world. They came with reports and questions, begging him to return. Sir, one of them pleaded, the board is lost without you. The company's in chaos. We need you back. William stood silent for a long moment, then said softly, no, you don't. They looked shocked. He continued, you don't need the man I was. You need a new kind of leader, someone who remembers people before profit. The assistant blinked. So you're really staying here? William smiled faintly. I'm not staying here forever, but I'm not coming back as the same man either. Elijah stood nearby, watching quietly, his expression unreadable. When the visitors left, William turned to him. Was that the right choice? He asked. Elijah smiled. The right choice doesn't always make sense to others, but peace never asks for permission. Days blended into weeks. William and Elijah worked together, like two sides of the same flame, one burning with the logic of the world, the other glowing with the wisdom of the Spirit. They argued, laughed, prayed, and built. At night, they would sit by the fire as the children gathered around. Elijah would tell old stories about the stars and the earth, while William shared tales of cities made of glass and steel. The children would listen wide-eyed, caught between two worlds that had finally found harmony. And somewhere in that harmony, love began to bloom. Not the romantic kind, something deeper. A love born of understanding, of shared scars, of two men who had walked different roads only to arrive at the same truth, that healing is never about one man saving another, it's about finding the divine in each other. One evening, as they watched the villagers sing around a bonfire, William turned to Elijah and said, I never asked you about the promise. Elijah raised an eyebrow. What promise? The one I made when I was desperate, William said with a small smile. The one where I said I'd marry you if you healed me. Elijah laughed, the sound deep and warm. Ah, that promise. William chuckled. So, do I still owe you a wedding? Elijah's eyes softened. You already kept it. William frowned slightly. How? Elijah looked toward the firelight reflecting in the villagers' faces, their laughter, their joy, their peace. You married truth, he said, and that union is stronger than any vow. William stared at him for a long moment, the meaning sinking deep. Then he smiled, eyes glistening. Then this is the only marriage I ever want. Elijah nodded, his face illuminated by the flames. Then keep it, and you'll never be sick again. As the night deepened, the fire crackled and the stars shimmered like scattered gold above them. The village was alive with song, and William, once a man drowning in his own empire, sat quietly among them, his heart full. No title, no fortune, no disease. Just life. And in that stillness, he realized something beautiful. The cure wasn't just his, it was theirs. A cure for greed, for loneliness, for the illusion that we stand alone. He looked at Elijah, beside him the man who had given him more than medicine, who had given him meaning, and said softly, thank you for showing me how to live again. Elijah smiled without turning. Don't thank me, he said. Thank the sickness that brought you here. They both laughed quietly as the camera slowly pulled back, revealing the firelight glowing against the dark. Two men sitting side by side beneath the endless sky. The narrator's voice fades in. In a world obsessed with wealth, one man had to lose everything to find himself. And in finding himself, he discovered that true love isn't romance. It's transformation. The city had changed, but not as much as William had. When the private jet touched down on the glimmering tarmac, cameras were already waiting. Reporters surged forward, shouting questions, flashes bursting like lightning against the sleek glass of the terminal. Mr. Alden, how did you survive the incurable? Is it true you went missing in Africa? Are the rumors of a spiritual healer true? William stepped out slowly. No entourage, no tailored arrogance, just a man in simple clothes, eyes quiet yet powerful. The world saw the same billionaire who'd once ruled headlines, but something in his gaze silenced even the loudest voices. He didn't wave, he didn't speak, he simply smiled, bowed his head slightly, and walked through the sea of chaos like a monk passing through fire. On the following weeks, the story exploded. The miracle of William Alden. Talk shows debated it, doctors dismissed it, investors panicked. His recovery was a phenomenon and everyone wanted to own it. But when William finally spoke, the words stunned the world. He didn't credit any hospital, nor a cutting-edge drug. He said only, healing began when I stopped owning everything and started surrendering something. The press couldn't make sense of it. They called it cryptic, delusional, or poetic. But to those who truly listened, there was a tremor of truth beneath the mystery. One crisp morning, William stood before a panel of his company's board. Men and women who had once feared him now studied him as if he were a stranger. Their voices were sharp, worried. You can't just give it away, William. One shouted, these foundations you're proposing will destroy the firm. Another leaned forward, angry. You built this empire from nothing. Why burn it down now? William's tone was calm, steady, because it was never mine to begin with. A stunned silence filled the glass room overlooking the city skyline. He continued softly, you talk about loss as if I'm losing something, but I've already gained more than any of you could imagine. His hands rested on the table, steady as his breath. I'm not burning the empire. I'm planting it. That day, William signed the papers, transferring 60% of his fortune into global healing centers, clinics dedicated to the poor, to those without access to care. The rest would fund education, water projects, and rural medicine. The backlash was immediate. Headlines screamed betrayal. Stock prices tumbled. Former allies mocked him, but for the first time, William didn't care. Every insult felt like wind passing through open palms. He remembered Elijah's voice: true healing demands surrender. And surrender he did. Weeks later, William visited one of the first centers under construction, a modest clinic by the coast, where children ran barefoot through the sand. The walls were still unpainted, but laughter echoed inside. A young woman approached him shyly. "Sir, are you the man who paid for this place?" William smiled. "No, I'm the man who was taught how to pay attention." She didn't understand, but she smiled anyway, and that was enough. At night, William would sometimes sit alone by the water, the same ocean where he had once nearly died. He'd close his eyes and listen. The waves sounded almost like Elijah's chants. In those moments, he didn't see a healer or a billionaire, just two souls who had met at the edge of death and learned to live again. He whispered softly into the wind, "Thank you, Elijah." Months passed. The world adjusted. The name William Alden was no longer spoken with fear or envy, but with quiet respect. One day, a journalist asked him during a live interview, "If you could go back to your old life, would you?" William smiled faintly. "I did go back," he said, "but I didn't bring the old life with me." The interviewer blinked. "And what about Elijah, the man who healed you?" William paused. "He didn't heal me. He reminded me where healing lives." The interviewer leaned closer. "And where is that?" William looked straight into the camera. "Within every man who learns to love more than he fears." The studio went silent. For once, no one had a follow-up question. That night, William walked through the city streets alone. No guards, no luxury cars. The neon signs reflected off puddles like fading stars. He saw people hurrying home, faces weary, eyes burdened by survival. He stopped by a small clinic, his clinic. Inside, a volunteer doctor treated a coughing child. The mother held the boy's hand and mouthed a silent prayer. William stepped back, letting the door close quietly. His eyes glistened, not from sadness but from understanding. He had once paid billions to escape death. Now, he was paying everything to protect life. As dawn broke, William stood on a rooftop overlooking the awakening city. The first rays of sun touched his face. He breathed deeply, the air tasting of rain and redemption. His phone buzzed, a message from Elijah's village. "The children planted the trees where you once sat. They're calling it the Garden of Healing." William smiled. He typed back, "Tell them, I'll visit soon." The screen dimmed. The city roared below, alive and imperfect but beautiful. He closed his eyes and whispered, "I once sought to own the world. Now, I just want to serve it." And as the sun rose higher, painting the horizon gold, the world saw the miracle. They could measure in charts and blood tests. But the real miracle, the one no doctor could diagnose, was that a man who once lived for power now breathed for peace. William Alden was healed, not just in body, but in spirit, and somewhere far away, under the same morning sky, Elijah smiled, knowing the world had just witnessed the rarest cure of all, the cure within. The city had changed, but not as much as William had when the private jet touched down on the glimmering tarmac. Cameras were already waiting. Reporters surged forward, shouting questions, flashes bursting like lightning against the sleek glass of the terminal. "Mr. Alden, how did you survive the incurable? Is it true you went missing in Africa? Are the rumors of a spiritual healer true?" William stepped out slowly. No entourage, no tailored arrogance, just a man in simple clothes, eyes quiet yet powerful. The world saw the same billionaire who'd once ruled headlines, but something in his gaze silenced even the loudest voices. He didn't wave, he didn't speak, he simply smiled, bowed his head slightly, and walked through the sea of chaos like a monk passing through fire. On the following weeks, the story exploded. The miracle of William Alden. Talk shows debated it, doctors dismissed it, investors panicked. His recovery was a phenomenon and everyone wanted to own it. But when William finally spoke, the words stunned the world. He didn't credit any hospital, nor a cutting-edge drug. He said only, "Healing began when I stopped owning everything and started surrendering something." The press couldn't make sense of it. They called it cryptic, delusional, or poetic. But to those who truly listened, there was a tremor of truth beneath the mystery. One crisp morning, William stood before a panel of his company's board. Men and women who had once feared him now studied him as if he were a stranger. Their voices were sharp, worried. "You can't just give it away, William," one shouted. "These foundations you're proposing will destroy the firm." Another leaned forward, angry. "You built this empire from nothing. Why burn it down now?" William's tone was calm, steady, because it was never mine to begin with. A stunned silence filled the glass room overlooking the city skyline. He continued softly, "You talk about loss as if I'm losing something, but I've already gained more than any of you could imagine." His hands rested on the table, steady as his breath. "I'm not burning the empire. I'm planting it. That day, William signed the papers, transferring 60% of his fortune into global healing centers, clinics dedicated to the poor, to those without access to care. The rest would fund education, water projects, and rural medicine. The backlash was immediate. Headlines screamed betrayal. Stock prices tumbled. Former allies mocked him, but for the first time, William didn't care. Every insult felt like wind passing through open palms. He remembered Elijah's voice: true healing demands surrender. And surrender he did. Weeks later, William visited one of the first centers under construction, a modest clinic by the coast, where children ran barefoot through the sand. The walls were still unpainted, but laughter echoed inside. A young woman approached him shyly. "Sir, are you the man who paid for this place?" William smiled. "No, I'm the man who was taught how to pay attention." She didn't understand, but she smiled anyway, and that was enough. At night, William would sometimes sit alone by the water, the same ocean where he had once nearly died. He'd close his eyes and listen. The waves sounded almost like Elijah's chants. In those moments, he didn't see a healer or a billionaire, just two souls who had met at the edge of death and learned to live again. He whispered softly into the wind, "Thank you, Elijah." Months passed. The world adjusted. The name William Alden was no longer spoken with fear or envy, but with quiet respect. One day, a journalist asked him during a live interview, "If you could go back to your old life, would you?" William smiled faintly. "I did go back," he said, "but I didn't bring the old life with me." The interviewer blinked. "And what about Elijah, the man who healed you?" William paused. "He didn't heal me. He reminded me where healing lives." The interviewer leaned closer. "And where is that?" William looked straight into the camera. "Within every man who learns to love more than he fears." The studio went silent. For once, no one had a follow-up question. That night, William walked through the city streets alone. No guards, no luxury cars. The neon signs reflected off puddles like fading stars. He saw people hurrying home, faces weary, eyes burdened by survival. He stopped by a small clinic. His clinic. Inside, a volunteer doctor treated a coughing child. The mother held the boy's hand and mouthed a silent prayer. William stepped back, letting the door close quietly. His eyes glistened, not from sadness but from understanding. He had once paid billions to escape death. Now, he was paying everything to protect life. As dawn broke, William stood on a rooftop overlooking the awakening city. The first rays of sun touched his face. He breathed deeply, the air tasting of rain and redemption. His phone buzzed. A message from Elijah's village. "The children planted the trees where you once sat. They're calling it the Garden of Healing." William smiled. He typed back, "Tell them, I'll visit soon." The screen dimmed. The city roared below, alive and imperfect but beautiful. He closed his eyes and whispered, "I once sought to own the world. Now, I just want to serve it." And as the sun rose higher, painting the horizon gold, the world saw the miracle. They could measure in charts and blood tests, but the real miracle, the one no doctor could diagnose, was that a man who once lived for power, now breathed for peace. William Alden was healed, not just in body, but in spirit. And somewhere far away, under the same morning sky, Elijah smiled, knowing the world had just witnessed the rarest cure of all. The cure within. It began with a letter, a simple envelope, hand-delivered to William's office one quiet morning. No seal, no signature, only a few lines written in a familiar, weathered hand. "The river runs quiet now. My time has come. Don't mourn me, build where we once healed." Elijah William froze. The world around him seemed to fade. The hum of machines, the distant voices, the ticking clock, all gone. Only the echo of Elijah's voice remained in his mind. He closed his eyes. The air felt heavy, the way it does before a storm. Then he whispered, barely audible, "He's gone." Days later, the jet soared once again over the wide African sky. But this time, there was no desperation, only silence. Deep and reverent. When William stepped off the plane, the same warm wind that had once carried him to his healing brushed against his face. The village looked different: wider roads, stronger homes, laughter echoing through the air. Elijah's presence lingered in every stone and every smile. The villagers greeted him quietly, with eyes that said everything words couldn't. An old woman approached, holding Elijah's wooden staff. "He told us you'd come," she said softly. "He said, the man I once healed will finish what I began." William took the staff with trembling hands. It felt alive, warm, almost pulsing with memory. The ceremony was held under the baobab tree where Elijah used to pray. There was no casket, no marble, no grandeur, just a simple mound of earth and a circle of people who had once been touched by his kindness. As the sun dipped low, painting the sky gold and crimson, William stepped forward. His voice broke at first. "Elijah once told me," he began, "that healing is not about saving lives, but about awakening them." He looked around the faces of the poor, the sick, the broken, each now standing strong because one man had cared enough to listen. He continued, "He gave me back my life, but not so I could live for myself. He gave it so I could live for others." A soft wind passed through the trees. almost as if Elijah himself had nodded. In the weeks that followed, William refused to leave. He spent his mornings walking through the fields Elijah once cultivated, listening to stories of those the healer had saved. There was the young girl who had been paralyzed but now ran barefoot through the grass. There was a farmer who had lost everything to drought until Elisha helped him find water beneath the soil. And there was old Baco, the man who had once doubted Elijah, but now carried his teachings in his heart. Each story was a flame, and together, they formed a fire that would never die. One night, sitting by the riverbank, William stared at the reflection of the stars. He spoke aloud, though no one was there. "You once told me healing demands surrender. I thought I understood that, but now, I see it's not just about letting go of pain, it's about letting go of ourselves." The night air was still. The river whispered softly. William smiled faintly. "You didn't leave me, Elijah. You multiplied yourself." Months later, construction began on a new sanctuary, a place Elijah had dreamed of but never built. William named it the House of Healing. The walls were not of glass or gold, but of clay and stone, shaped by the hands of the people Elijah had once helped. Children painted the murals. Women wove symbols of hope into the walls. When it was done, the villagers gathered for its opening. William stood before them, holding Elijah's staff like a torch. "This house," he said, "is not for the sick alone. It is for anyone who has forgotten what it means to be alive." The crowd murmured softly. Some wept. Others prayed. He continued, "Elijah taught me that healing isn't a miracle, it's a choice. Every time we lift someone else, we are healed a little more ourselves." As the sun rose over the sanctuary's first morning, a line began to form outside, dozens of villagers seeking help. But what they found inside wasn't medicine, it was peace, it was love, it was Elijah's spirit, alive in the hands of those he had once guided. Doctors, healers, and volunteers came from across the world to serve. Some had read about Elijah's legacy, others had once been saved by it. William watched from the doorway, silent, his heart full. One evening, as he walked through the corridors of the new house, William noticed a boy painting on the wall. The child looked up and smiled. "My mother said Elijah healed you." William crouched beside him. "He did," he said softly, "but not the way you think." The boy tilted his head. "Then how?" William pointed to the boy's hands, steady and covered in color. "By teaching me how to heal others, the same way you're doing right now." The boy grinned, dipped his brush in gold paint, and drew a bright sun on the wall. That night, under the same stars that once watched Elijah heal, William stood before the sanctuary's gate. He felt no sorrow anymore, only gratitude. He whispered, "You gave me your final gift, Elijah. You taught me that purpose is the only cure that lasts." Then he placed the wooden staff beside the entrance, embedding it in the earth. A soft wind blew through, carrying the scent of rain and blossoms. The staff stood tall, like a symbol carved by time itself. Years later, people from across the world would visit the House of Healing. Some came seeking cures, others came seeking meaning. And at the heart of it all, there was a single inscription carved into the wall above the doorway. "Healing is not found in the body, it is born in the soul." No one knew who wrote it, but those who had met Elijah, the man he once healed, never needed to ask. And as the sun set over the sanctuary, bathing the land in light, William's voice echoed one last time in prayer. "Thank you for showing me that the greatest medicine is love, and the greatest healer is truth." The wind carried the words across the river, through the fields, and into the horizon where heaven and earth seemed to meet again. And there, Elijah's legacy lived on, not in miracles, but in men who remembered what it meant to be human. The sky was gray that morning, the kind of gray that doesn't mourn, but remembers. A soft mist rolled across the valley as William walked slowly toward the old baobab tree. In his hands, he carried a single white lily, Elijah's favorite flower. The same tree that once shaded their first conversation now watched silently as he returned for the last. The village was still. The sanctuary nearby, the House of Healing, was alive with laughter and prayer, but William had stepped away from it all. He wanted to be alone, just him and the man who had changed everything. He reached the griva, simple mound of earth beneath a carved stone that read, "He healed not by touch, but by truth." William knelt, his knees sank into the damp soil. For a long moment, he couldn't speak. His breath trembled, and his throat tightened with the weight of years. Finally, he whispered, "You healed me, and I kept my promise." A breeze moved through the leaves above him, gentle, almost tender, like a hand on his shoulder. He smiled faintly. "I thought I understood what healing meant," he said softly. "Back then, I thought it was about saving my body, about surviving, but now, I see it was about saving my soul." He looked toward the horizon where the river shimmered in the morning light. "Do you remember, Elijah?" His voice broke into a whisper. "You told me healing starts when giving costs you something. I didn't understand it then, but now, I've given everything. My company, my fortune, my pride. And somehow, I've gained everything that matters." The memory of their first meeting flashed before him, the desperate billionaire on the brink of death, and the calm healer who had asked for nothing but honesty. William could still hear Elijah's voice echoing in his mind. "You can't buy peace, William. You can only surrender to it." That single line had rewritten his life. He remembered the long nights of pain, the moments he nearly gave up, and the day he finally realized the cure was not in herbs or wealthy, it was in humility. Now, he had become the healer. Behind the sanctuary, people lined up every morning, villagers, travelers, even broken men from the cities seeking not medicine, but meaning. And William, once the man who built empires for profit, now sat with them in the courtyard, listening, praying, and teaching the same lessons Elijah had once given him. He never called himself doctor or master. He called himself a student of peace. And the world, once obsessed with his fortune, now whispered about his faith. A young woman approached quietly from behind. It was Amina, the same girl Elijah had once healed when she could not walk. She stood tall now, carrying flowers for the grave. "Mr. William," she said softly, kneeling beside him. "He'd be proud of you." William smiled through the tears in his eyes. "No," he said. He'd laugh and say, "I still have much to learn." Amina placed the flowers down gently. "You built his dream," she said. "That's enough." He turned to her, his voice steady now. "No, Amina, he built it through me. I just finally stopped getting in the way." As they stood, the morning light broke through the clouds, bathing the grave in soft gold. Birds began to sing in the distance, the same melody that used to fill Elijah's hut every dawn. William tilted his head upward and closed his eyes. "Elijah," he whispered, "I once promised to marry you if you healed me. You told me I already did that. I married truth. I didn't understand those words then, but now, I live by them." He smiled faintly. "That was the promise, and it's fulfilled." Cut to a quiet montage. William, walking through the sanctuary's courtyard, greeting patients, children, laughing as they chase each other around the fountain. Doctors treating the sick, not with pills, but with compassion. The camera lingers on William as he gently touches a man's shoulder, saying, "Peace begins here." Tapping his heart. Every corner of the sanctuary pulsed with Elijah's spirit, alive in every act of kindness. Every smile, every prayer whispered in gratitude. Later that evening, as the sun dipped into the horizon, William sat beneath the baobab tree once more. A storm was coming in the distance, its clouds rumbling like an old memory. He didn't move. He just watched the light fade. His voice came in a soft narration. His final reflection: "I used to think power meant control. But real power is the ability to let go. I used to think healing came from doctors, or wealth, or miracles. But now I know some cures aren't found in medicine. They're found in surrender." He placed his hand on the earth once more, right above Elijah's grave. "I surrender," he whispered, "and I'm finally free." The wind rose, carrying his words through the trees, across the sanctuary, over the hills like a message meant for every soul still searching for peace. And as the sky burned gold one last time, the camera pulled back, revealing the sanctuary glowing in the twilight, a living testament to two men who had found healing not in wealth or power, but in truth. William stood steady and calm. The weight of his past had vanished. In its place only light. He turned toward the horizon, where the river met the setting sun, and walked forward slowly, his silhouette fading into gold.